and stay with the NPA's investigating Directorate, having arrested former Eskom acting Chief Executive Matshela Koko, his wife Mosima, his stepdaughter Koketso Choma, and others on charges of corruption. Now, the charges relate to a multi-billion-rand contract Eskom entered into with Swiss engineering company Asea Brown Boveri in 2015. Cowan has been watching the story very closely for us and is News 24's investigative journalist and joins us live now. Carl, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I mean, a 2015 contract, a subcontracting of a local company. What is at the heart of this matter for someone who has not followed it?
It's quite simple. You know, the awarding of contracts were allegedly manipulated by Mr. Koko, ultimately to his own benefit, and, you know, using his friends and his family to channel that money to companies and various trusts that would ultimately benefit his family and his wife. And he used his position at Eskom, according to the charge sheet that we've seen today, to make sure that contracts were awarded to a company called Impulse International, in which one of his stepdaughters had a shareholding. It's really just, you know, cookie cutter corruption kind of stuff. There's nothing really super intricate about it, other than, of course, the enormous complexity of the contracts themselves.
And Carl, you know, listening to what and reading about what has been coming out from this particular matter, and of course hearing from Matshela Koko himself, and you look at who is in the dock with him today, his stepdaughter, of course. Let's talk about the significance of that, as well as his wife joining him in the dock.
So actually, two of his stepdaughters, his wife, one of his best friends that they went to university together. Matshela was Mr. Koko, was the best man at his wedding, and one of his stepdaughters was a bridesmaid at Mr. Mokwena's wedding. The other person is an attorney, Mr. Johannes Coetzee, who has obviously advised the family in all sorts of financial matters, and particularly the Investigative Directorate, saying that he sort of masterminded the financial schemes and how they moved the money around with all of these deals. And then there are people who are on the charge sheet who are not in front of court, you know, former ABB employees who are in Germany, another individual who is in the United Kingdom. So this is really a culmination of an investigation from 2017 that looked at, you know, two people at Eskom, being Mr. Matshela Koko and Mr. Franz Etole, and how they managed to enrich themselves by manipulating how contracts were awarded at Kusile.
And it's going to be interesting also, given, you know, some of what he's said, and that's Matshela Koko, of course, when it comes to the stepdaughter's involvement as well. It's going to be interesting to see what cell phone records also reveal here as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's going to be an enormous amount of evidence that will eventually be revealed, you know, as the trial continues eventually. This is an enormously complex investigation. There are 18 accused on the charge sheet, 24 counts. It's going to be difficult, I think, to follow and to make sense of. But I understand from our sources at the Investigative Directorate that they've done, you know, enormously well to simplify this as much as possible, so that when it does go to trial, we're not sitting with a situation where you literally have to have someone explain every single statement that's being made because of the complexity.
And we look at, obviously, some of the investigations, you know, that we've seen when it comes to the issues around Eskom. You're looking at the Bowman's, you know, investigations. You're looking at the SIU as well. Of course, painting a picture of billions, you know, that would have been squandered allegedly here. And you know, this is, of course, what some would call the years of state capture that all of this would have said to have been happening on. Looking at this particular case, how close are we to untangling some of the other, you know, matters that would have unfolded here?
You know, that's extremely difficult. There was so much that happened at Kusile, you know, and News 24 has published extensively about corruption at Kusile specifically. There's so much that happened there. There's another case that's ongoing in court, the tubular construction matter, where other Eskom employees, namely Franz Lakudi and some of his colleagues, you know, they basically ran a scheme that saw about 76 million rand paid by major contractors into another company. You know, so that's these are just, the more extreme examples. But there are many cases that are still sitting with the NPA that have been, criminal cases have been opened against other contractors at Kusile, also contracts worth billions. It's going to take years and years of really hard effort to untangle all of this and ensure that it goes through the justice system in the appropriate way.
Especially when you listen to also recently what we keep hearing in Parliament is said to be happening at some of these power stations. So certainly quite a lot is going to be, uncovered here, hopefully. Let's talk about one of the accused. You've hinted at Johannes Coetzee role here, but tell us a bit more because he is quite a significant role player, is he not?
He is, yes. So according to the Investigative Directorate, Mr. Coetzee was really the mastermind behind, the mechanics of the money movements. So Mr. Coetzee is an attorney from Middelburg. I'm not, I don't think anyone is quite 100% sure what the historic connection is between Mr. Koko, his wife, and Mr. Coetzee, but it looks like he was the guy who sort of guided them and said, open this trust, do it through this bank account, do it through this company, and so on. And for that, he is now also facing charges of, violating the Prevention of Corrupt Activities Act. And it's quite interesting, because we could never, as an investigative reporter, I could never really crack some of these money movements, and we could never really understand why there was money moving from attorneys' trust accounts and so on. So him being charged, and the charge sheet now gives us a much clearer indication. He's basically being accused of, masterminding how they hid the money flows.
And it's interesting, some of the reasons that, as I was listening to the proceedings, that some of the accused are canvassing to try and be able to get bail. Others have had to surrender their passports as well. Matshela Koko hinting that he's doing business in the SADC region, and thus, of course, possibly hinting at the fact that he may not, really almost like hand over his passport willingly because he still would like to conduct some of the business. Let's talk about some of the reasons that they've put forward and, the reasons for them being granted bail.
Yeah, look, so bail hearings like these, people will always canvass, are they a danger to public? Are they going to interfere with the investigation? And obviously they always deny this. And then there's always a question of affordability. The question about passports in this one is an interesting one because obviously people have a lot of business interests outside of the borders of South Africa. But I do not think for a second that the magistrates should take that into consideration. Justice, you can't pick and choose justice for yourself if you're being, accused of grand corruption of such a scale.
Carl, I tell you what, I think we're still going to be, as journalists, combing through quite a lot of paperwork, a lot of court documents to be able to also really get a sense of, the details on this particular one. But thank you so much for simplifying it for our viewers tonight. Do appreciate it. I know you've been doing quite a lot of work on the Eskom stories. That is Cowan, News 24's investigative journalist.